Hello there, and welcome back to the Watching Hawaii podcast. Getting things back started, I need to record at least an intro and an outro. I'm not gonna have any pre-roll. Well, unless someone starts sponsoring me, I'll get some pre-rolls, post-rolls, and this is short form, so I'm not gonna do any mid-rolls unless they're paying me a lot. But welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Another episode, and the topic of today is, well, for the namesake of the podcast. I know this is the namesake of the podcast is not the main thing I'm going to focus on, but they're going to get an episode. I may create a theme around certain episodes or whatnot. Maybe I'll call this West Coast Wednesdays to focus on some teams on the West Coast, and maybe for my alma mater, I'll focus on Michigan Mondays. Who knows? But hey, you're here, you're listening. Hope you enjoy. So the topic of the day, talking about the University, well, less about the University of Hawaii and more so about their opponent this coming up week for week zero, which I know I said in the last episode, their game may probably not be of note, which given the history of the Delaware State Hornets. Delaware State, they're an HBCU program. So if you want to judge them by their postseason play, well, HBCUs in the FCS division, they function a little bit differently. They don't like being part of the college football playoff. Well, of the FCS playoffs, not the college football playoff. They can't make that unless something weird happens. Shout out Steve McNair when he was at Alcorn State in '94. He finished third in the Heisman, but that's probably never going to happen again, nor will a football team from the FCS make the college football playoff. But the FCS playoffs, well, for those who don't know, FCS playoffs, actually, if you're in them, it's not really a moneymaker for you unless you can get the stadium fully packed every game that you host as the home team, which now I think since 2013 they've held it at 24 teams make the playoffs for FCS. Anyone can come in, leave a comment, correct me if I'm wrong. But the bigger thing here is that you don't make any money, so all the ticket sales immediately go to the NCAA. And that's one thing the HBCU saw as one of the problems with they were able to send in the MEAC and the SWAC. If you know those two conferences went, especially with Deion Sanders saying he is SWAC, which objectively he's not. There's a whole history there in the Southwest Athletic Conference, but they decided to create something known as the Celebration Bowl. You may have seen that bowl game. It's a fairly good bowl game for both conferences. They make a decent amount of money off of it, which is what bowl games are all about. Being sponsored, conferences getting money coming in. A lot better for them than that. So this is Delaware State. They are Hawaii's opponent, and I gave a lot of background. Delaware State, their last winning season. They went 6-5 in 2012. So it's been a while since this program's been a reputable and competitive program. So, this is of course that very easy come in here, come in here, get your tail whooped, we'll give you some money type game, you know? But the main reason I'm talking about Delaware State and them going to face Hawaii is, well, Delaware State's literally all the way on the East Coast. If you know where Delaware is located at, you look on a map. It's just about as far as east as you can go in the United States. But their total flight trip to make it to Hawaii through connections, it's 10.5 hours. And well, today Delaware State, the bus company they use to book them, because it's a bunch of guys, you got to get them from your university to the airport. The bus company messed up with a scheduling error, and well, they missed their flight. Which, given it's 10.5 hours, hey, you don't want to miss that flight because rebooking that and getting things going again is going to take a lot. But apparently, Hawaii said, hey, well, not Hawaii, Delaware State said, hey, we basically planned for this just in case there was any mishaps because they said, hey, it's a long trip. Anything could mess this up from running smoothly. So, hey, they planned it out. So they did give themselves a day and a half within their scheduling, day and a half worth of, hey, just room just in case anything happens to the time where they really need to be there at the last second so they can have the guys there, a little bit adjusted to the time zone, and then have guys warm up. You got to get your guys ready before the game, go through some walkthroughs and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's one of the stories, and it gets me thinking about the namesake of this podcast and, traveling to Hawaii and how Hawaii is to a degree responsible for week zero. Week zero basically exists mostly because of Hawaii. I mean, there's been other games in the past, especially with the inventions of some kickoff classic that they've come and gone over the years, which funny enough, the last episode of this podcast talking about the Aer Lingus College Football Classic, which is played in Dublin, Ireland, is technically the longest running kickoff classic because that started in 1988. So let you know, a lot of these kickoff classics don't last, but some kickoff classics were made, but also Week Zero, which was basically based off of what was known, what you could call the Hawaii rule, but basically it didn't just apply to Hawaii. It can apply to every any college football program that was not part of the continuous 48 states of the United States. So basically, if you were to play a college football game within Hawaii, Alaska, Guam, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, or any U.S. territory, you would be allowed to have an extra game on your schedule. And you would be basically, well, not just actually an extra home game on your schedule specifically, so that you can make up the revenue for what it costs to book the flight out there. And so, yeah, traveling to Hawaii is a little bit logistically different. Well, for a very long time, I think it's a lot smoother now, as they don't keep their schedule. I'm going to get to that, but get it back and forth to Hawaii because it's, I believe, from LA is still a 4 to 5 hour flight, which is basically the closest airport you're going to get to being in Hawaii. So it takes some time to get to Hawaii, and you got to schedule things out because you're jumping a lot of time zones. You got to get your guys on schedule and everything. But Hawaii is basically the reason for week zero because some teams who weren't in a conference with Hawaii, if they wanted to schedule Hawaii for a game, which Hawaii was open to, for them coming to Hawaii, basically they would put themselves at the immediate opening of the season. It's like, hey, let's get this out the way, then maybe get a bye week or two, then we get our guys back to playing games on the mainland. But that's that's just getting me thinking of this topic because I know for a very long time before Hawaii and a little bit of modernization of and flights, and I don't want to say flight patterns, but just the way we now have established things in terms of flight travel, technology, and everything. That it used to be Hawaii, their schedule was comprised of basically you spent a month playing home games and a month playing away games, and it just flip flopped. Just because the amount of travel and the amount of cost it would take, because you're talking about 100 kids that you got to get back and forth, and all of the staff and all of the equipment. So for their program, for a very long time, Hawaii was, hey, we're going to be home for a month, we're going to be away for a month, then home for a month, away for a month. And that's how their schedule worked, which for being a football player, basically, the guys lived, I believe, one of the places was, I believe they set up with Fresno State. Fresno State, I believe, was one of the places where they would set up at and basically was like, hey, you're doing remote classes for a month, but you're still playing football training and on these facilities. Then next thing you know, hey, all our away games are done. Let's go back to the mainland. Then you're back home on campus. I think that was a pretty interesting setup, but I've known hearing interviews from certain players who spoke about their experiences in recruiting. I know Pat McAfee spoke about it, and other players have said it, where that part of knowing that's how your schedule is going to be, and you weren't going to be basically half the time you were actually playing in season with Hawaii, you weren't going to be on the island. A lot of guys thought it was like, oh, the selling point would be, oh, I get to live in Hawaii. Then you realize while I'm playing football, I don't get to enjoy Hawaii. So I know it makes it hard for Hawaii to recruit, but they have a very strong hold. And well, there's a lot of Hawaiians and Polynesians, as we've seen, DeMarcus Mariota's, Tua Tagovailoa's, and why am I blanking? Oh, Troy Polamalu's of the world. There's a very good amount of guys who want to play football from those areas, and then some guys from California and such like to go out there as well. So I just wanted to speak on that. I mean, you're playing, not missing your plane because your bus gets scheduled and delayed. That's, I mean, that sucks for traveling, but it could be worse. worst things have happened. I mean, I was at the University of Michigan when, which season would that have been? That would have probably been the 2016 season, where our basketball team going into the Big Ten Conference tournament, their plane ran off the runway that we have in Ann Arbor. Yep. Ann Arbor has a small airport that is mostly used for a lot of private means, or well, you could say every airport is used for private means. I mean, a lot of people we have local airports. Hey, just go. You can look it up on your Google Maps. You can find your small local airports that aren't, your big jumbo jetliner ones, but find your small ones, and that's what happened. And they ran off the runway. And of course, if you're talking plane incidents in college football, we all know the terrible incident that happened to Marshall University's football team during the 70s, which is awful because they lost basically the whole team and all of their staff in one incident. So hopefully, and I pray and wish for safe travels for Delaware, Delaware State and the Hornets. Which, if you're thinking, oh, Delaware State are moving up, no, that is the Delaware Blue Hens who are moving up to FBS and playing with the big boys in the future. But this is another episode of Up Watching Hawaii podcast. I'm recording this late in the night, so you're gonna hear this in your morning. Hopefully, you like what you hear on your morning drive and you come back for more. I appreciate you. Ski Mask Murphy checking out.